Welcome back. Visitors heading into SeaWorld were greeted by loud protesters today.
Now, at the Miami Seaquarium, another controversy is brewing over a whale named Lolita.
Animal advocates have been fighting for Lolita's release for decades.
In the months since CNN first aired the documentary Blackfish, exposing alleged mistreatment of killer whales at SeaWorld, the company has faced unrelenting criticism.
There must be some kind of way out of here, out of here. Be some kind of way out of here, out of here.
When I was 14 years old, I saw a documentary called The Cove, and it really opened my eyes to what's really going on behind the scenes in captivity, and it inspired me to get involved and raise awareness amongst my generation, because I realized that we're the ones holding the key in our hands, we're the ones supporting this industry, and we're the ones who can end it. I started a blog, I started writing about the issue. I got together with some friends and we started a nonprofit, and we decided to make a film because we realized that film affects people in ways that written word can't, and we wanted to bring it into the classroom. We wanted students to see what's going on behind the scenes in marine parks and how they can make a difference, and that this is an issue that they can help solve. This is a problem that has a solution. They can help end it, and we can give a voice to the voiceless. Soon after I started Blue Freedom with some friends of mine, we realized, like, how can we most comprehensively put all of this information together? And so I basically just started filming interviews, and I started talking to people, and I'm like, I had no idea what I was doing. So I'm like, we'll just, figure it out as we go, kind of thing. So I wrote a letter to Rick O'Barry. Rick O'Barry is one of my heroes, for sure. He's legendary. His time at Miami Seaquarium, he trained all the dolphins for the Flipper TV series. He was the one who translated language into dolphin. All the hand signals and stuff that you see trainers using now, Rick was really instrumental in figuring out how to take a script and get dolphins to do things, which is ironic because now he's spent the past 40 years of his life freeing dolphins. And then finally, with this film, the opportunity came up for me to actually be able to meet up with him in Miami and interview him. Okay, so how would you describe what goes on in Taiji for someone like a student who has no idea?
1 minute is the most beautiful, tranquil body of water. Just breathtakingly beautiful. A few hours later, it can become, that same little body of water can become the most violent, it's like Dante's Inferno for dolphins or something. Bloody, just god-awful.
Laura Malama West was a student when she was over at the Cove. She took a ton of video. She was really one of the first young students to go over there and really see and document what was happening.
Whoa, there's somebody back there riding in the back of the truck. There's like 3 guys with them.
Like I said, when we first went over there, I didn't really know what to expect. I don't think any of us did. We had a rough idea from the movie, The Cove, and your job there is to be a voice for the voiceless. And it was get up really early in the morning, and we would wait, and we would monitor the horizon. And if the boat started to come in, then we would see if they were driving a pod.
Because the violence starts many, many miles offshore in international waters when the dolphins are first confronted.
And they find a pod, and what they do is they create an underwater wall of sound.
The dolphins are sound-oriented. That's their primary sense.
Like what sight is to us, sound is to them.
They live in a world of sound.
And so it's so easy to just push them right into shore with this underwater wall that all of these boats are creating.
This terrorizes these sound-oriented creatures. They've never heard anything like this before. And a lot of the dolphins die in the process of the drive, long before they even get to the cove. Fetuses are aborted, the old are left behind. Heart attacks, capture shock, mothers and babies separated.
Once they had driven them into the cove, all of them would kind of huddle together in a big pile before they got a chance to separate them into the different groups. And they separate them into males, females, and juveniles. And what happens from that point is trainers from the local dolphinariums come and they go through all of the different groups and they look for dolphins that are pretty, that look like flipper, that don't have scratches on them or missing parts of their fins. And they put them in pens in the harbor, which is around the corner from the actual killing cove.
Probably out of every pod, maybe you have at best maybe a dozen dolphins that are pretty enough to go to dolphin shows. So they're selected out, they're sold to marine parks.
And then the slaughter begins. They slaughter them for their meat. So it's a very violent procedure, no question about it.
They use a method called pliffing, which is when they take a metal rod and a mallet and they hammer it down into the animal's spinal cord. It's just a madhouse, the things that they do. I mean, we've seen trainers physically drown them because they were splashing too much and getting in their way. When you're watching that kind of death and destruction on such a mass scale every single day, it really takes a toll on you. And then everyone cleans up and they go and they butcher the meat and they sell in the local markets and everyone goes about their day.
Yeah, it's horrific, those captures.
Essentially, when you go to a dolphin show or a swim-with-dolphin program of any kind, you're supporting the Taiji dolphin slaughter either directly or indirectly. Not all dolphins captured are from Taiji, but even if you go to an aquarium or a swim-with program that has captive dolphins, you're saying this is okay. You know, I'm okay with the fact that dolphins are in captivity, and that's going to keep the slaughter in Taiji going. It's going to keep the slaughter in various other places going, and it's going to keep drives in other parts of the world going.
The capture of dolphins in Taiji, they only get about $500 for a dead dolphin for the meat. But for a live dolphin, they can get as much as $154,000, and probably more.
One thing that people kind of bring up sometimes is the fact that no live captured dolphins can be brought into the United States, but we kept seeing dolphins being loaded onto trucks, and then those trucks would just leave, and we figured they were going to the airports or local dolphinariums because we knew that they had orders to fill from all over the world. So we followed one day, and it was about a 12-hour day, and it was exhausting, and we managed to not be seen the whole time. We think what happens is these animals are shipped out from Taiji to different places in the world, and through their time there or somewhere along the way, the paperwork gets changed, and all of a sudden that's a captive-born dolphin or whale, and that's when they're brought into the United States.
All right, party people, we're on our way now. You know how to do it. Let's make some noise! Yeah, let's keep this place pumping and jumping. Hey, put your hands up and let's ride this wave.
The only time I went to SeaWorld was with my father. My father and I went to film for the documentary, actually, just some B-roll. It was just heartbreaking. Like, I remember watching the Shamu show and seeing everyone just kind of like screaming and wanting him to like splash them. It reminded me of what it must have been like to be in like a Roman Colosseum watching someone get like eaten by a lion. It's like, how is this entertaining to watch an animal suffer? And I remember just sitting there crying. And my dad's like, you can't have a breakdown right now. He's like, someone's gonna think, you know, there's something wrong. The first interviews that I actually sat down and did myself were with the former SeaWorld trainers. John Jett, Carol Ray, Samantha Berg, Jeffrey Ventry. They gave me so much information. They were so helpful.
When I started at SeaWorld, I wasn't thinking that captivity there was anything wrong with it.
I thought, you know, it would be like a bastion of research, you know, as it turned out to be a sea circus.
You know, my family would contact me like, what are you working at SeaWorld for? Like, you hate zoos. Like, you can't even go to a zoo without crying. And I never equated them.
You said in this interview here that the first 10 minutes of your first day at SeaWorld was a painful revelation.
Yeah, well, it was kind of a mixed observation, mixed emotion type of a deal for me. I mean, of course, I was really excited to be there.
When you first get hired at SeaWorld, you're kind of in a honeymoon period. You're happy to get the job.
But then, became immediately aware that, wow, these tanks are really small. It was really dramatic. It just hit me over the head that, man, the pools are really small relative to their enormous size.
This tiny pool we must have had 20 dolphins in there swimming around and competing for the little fish.
In the wild, it's been reported that they swim upwards of 100 miles a day. They can dive down 300, 400, 500, 600 feet.
And one of the things you can't help but notice as you watch them swimming in the wild is that they are swimming in straight lines, and they have these huge straight dorsal fins, and they just are where they're supposed to be.
You asked me earlier about what started to create like a red light in my brain, or it was some of the stuff that we were asked to tell the Ed Show kids that would come in, and it all had to do with the lifespan, the superior dental care, and the collapsed dorsal fins. And we're out there spewing out this basically corporate PR talking points.
They get the kind of mental enrichment and stimulation that comes through learning, interaction, and play.
We know that upwards of about 75% of females live to the post-menopausal age of about 40. In captivity, it's dramatically different. They just die at a much younger age. Like so many details, I didn't really think much about, what do they do with a 10,000-pound whale when it dies? And quite honestly, to this day, right now, if one dies, I'm not quite sure what happens to them. I'm sure that, they end up being probably landfilled, but when I was there were whales that died, and I never saw the disposal process. I had heard that in at least one case that an animal was cut up into basically small pieces and put into trash bags to be hauled away presumably to a landfill. In another case, one was buried on kind of a back lot area. And as I recall, there were some heavy rain events where the groundwater level came up, and it pushed this rotting carcass up through the ground in which it was buried, and eventually had to be scooped out with tractors and hauled to a landfill.
The veterinary care, to me, seemed to be sort of frontier medicine.
The fish that we're giving to the animals, we frequently did have to stuff them with medications in the morning.
Occasionally, more than occasionally, you would get reactions.
These steel gates are used to separate the animals. They will charge these gates. They wind up chomping down on a steel bar and knocks the enamel off their teeth. We're telling the public that we're providing them with superior dental care, but we're leaving out the part about how they broke their teeth.
Well, yeah, there's all these, sort of varying degrees of traumatic events occurring all the time. Oftentimes they're with animals that they don't share any kind of relation with. A hodgepodge of animals from different parks, from different parts of the world.
They're creating their own little subspecies of who knows what kind of hybrid animals.
There's a lot of whale-on-whale aggression. There was a small female named Winnie when I worked at SeaWorld that was a really sweet animal, and Winnie was beat up. I mean, it was relentless, just, harassed, beat up, bitten, raped, chased around. And poor Winnie was, she essentially spent her life cowering in the corner. And for me, it was very difficult to watch. And one particularly brutal episode, Winnie was beaten up and raped so badly that there was so much blood in the water that the 6 or 7 million gallons of water, whatever the case is, was so dark that the Shamu show had to be canceled. So It's hard to understand the volume of blood that is required to make 6 or 7 million gallons of pool water dark. So we're not talking about a couple of cups of blood here. We're talking about, a lot of blood loss. And so, I watched that and I was there, and we kept trying to separate the animals because they were really beating Winnie up, and we couldn't separate the animals, and it was tragic. It was heartbreaking. And I remember leaving that day and basically crying because Winnie was beat up so badly, and the poor thing had no place to run. In the wild, when that happens, the animals can just kind of get out of the way and they can take off. In the captive environment, that kind of escape option just doesn't exist.
What we were recognizing going on at SeaWorld is just what happens to humans when they're in a stressful environment and they can't adapt to it.
Chronic stress leads to all kinds of acute and chronic illnesses and pathology.
But at Shamu Stadium specifically, I always was disturbed by the way Goodwin was treated. First, when I was first working there, she would spend a lot of time with, oftentimes put into a pool with a transient organ named Candid, who died in 1990 of St. Louis virus encephalitis. But he would, basically serially rape her in the back pool, and this is a situation where she had nowhere to go, and I always thought that was pretty sad. When she first was brought into SeaWorld Florida, I could hear her crying out for a month or so. It went on for months, it was such a blood-curdling kind of vocalization, and it went part wide. You could hear her.
You could feel it. So that was something that always touched me and made it hard for me to go to work. So clearly, the things that you're seeing them do in the shows and even in the pools between shows are not extensions of their natural behavior. There's nothing natural about an adult orca logging on the surface of the water for hours at a time.
They're really bored. There's no place to swim. Getting feasted upon by thousands of mosquitoes under the blazing Florida sun and getting sunburned.
They don't exercise. They get less water because they're eating dead fish, and their caloric intake is less.
Yeah, food deprivation is a tool.
Animals that are hungry are more likely to perform.
So a really common setup would be for maybe the owner of the park to be coming in, and when he came into the park, he would inevitably want to see a Shamu show. And so 3 or 4 or 5 days out from that visit, you'd start cutting an animal or several animals' base of food, maybe in half, maybe by a third. So by the time the president or the owner arrived on Saturday, the animals were sufficiently food motivated. They were hungry, and they were more likely to cooperate with kind of what you were asking them to do. If you're a person with your eyes open and you're an objective observer, it becomes pretty immediately obvious that there's a lot of problems.
It seemed like there was more that we needed to do. So that was my reason for leaving. And so at 4:30 in the morning, I went down to a TV studio in Anchorage and went live on Fox and Friends.
That's correct. It's actually historic. There's about 6 people right now that are willing to speak out against SeaWorld, and that's unprecedented.
I remember leaving the studio and walking out of there being terrified. I was looking for the SeaWorld van to pull up. I just thought the black and white SeaWorld van was going to pull up. They were going to grab me and they were going to whisk me away. And that was going to be it. I was never going to see anybody. I was really frightened. And I think all of us have had that fear when we've spoken out for the first time, just really stepped out in public.
You have to give SeaWorld credit for, manufacturing this fantasy, and they've been selling it for 40 years, and they're genius at it, twisting this whole captivity thing and making us think that the whales love us and the whales want to be there, doing these silly tricks, and the public has bought it.
I think the thing about watching a show that public gets caught up in is that they really do think that the whale is hugging you, or they really do think the animal's saying, yes, I want that bucket instead of that fish. They are all trained behaviors, and they're simply responding to a cue.
And so the relationship that we have with the animals is much less a friendship relationship, where it's more like you'd have a relationship you'd have with a prison guard and a prisoner.
And that's one of the reasons I stopped training dolphins. When I walked away, I was probably the highest paid animal trainer in the world. But I got tired of being a professional liar. Captive dolphins are very different than dolphins in their natural environment. They become performing circus clowns. Does not represent dolphins in the real ecosystem in nature any more than Mickey Mouse represents a real mouse, especially those that are born in captivity. So here you have a dolphin that was born in this building, in a tank. This dolphin has never experienced the natural rhythms of the sea, or the tide, or the current, or the sunshine. This dolphin actually thinks that the ceiling is the sky. Children see that dolphin show and they walk out of there thinking, this is where they belong. These are disposable dolphins for our disposable society.
Hi, I'm Dave Rastovich, and I'm a surfer and co-founder of the group Surfers for Cetaceans. And Howie Cook, a good friend of mine, and I started this group in 2004. When it comes to cetaceans in captivity, I guess, if you were an alien coming to Earth and you wanted to learn about humans, you wouldn't go to a prison cell and study someone in solitary confinement. Well, that's what is going on when you go to theme parks or hotels or pools where any of these animals are kept. It's not a real situation. It's even more obvious to those of us who spend time with these creatures in the ocean. So being a surfer, you pretty much can guarantee you'll have a dolphin encounter sooner or later, and if you're lucky, whale encounters as well. But where I grew up in Australia, I've had the blessing to watch dolphins surf all my life, and they're easily the best surfers in the world.
Probably we all who have worked with them in the confines of a marine park then go see them out in the wild and just have this feeling of sadness for the animals that are left in a marine park, to see what they should be and could be experiencing. It's an emotional event for me every time I see it.
There's a different feel watching a pod of wild killer whales and just watching them move through the water versus watching captive killer whales. They're not the same thing. You're watching, I call them facsimiles of whales. It's two completely different things.
My name is Naomi Rose. I was inspired when I was a teenager, very young actually, I was 13 years old, to become a marine biologist. It wasn't until I was 19 that I saw these animals in the wild, swimming out in the open ocean, and it was, in fact, an incredibly visceral, emotional experience for me. If you ever see a dolphin riding the bow of the boat you're in, that trumps any dolphin show by orders of magnitude. You will be thrilled. The emotional response you will feel just naturally by witnessing that, you will not be able ever to duplicate that in captivity.
One of the great joys of doing whale research, or just watching them from shore or from a boat, just to see them in their normal daily behavior out there, that is just so fascinating. Well, I got involved in whales in 1980 when I got invited to join in on the research as a research assistant. Everybody is believed and taught in biology classes that, you know, animals have no emotions, no feelings, and you can't really, you know, relate to them. And yet I was seeing, no, they have these bonds of trust and love that hold their families together. They're all in constant contact. They're sensing each other, you know, by their calls, by their echolocation, locating each other. Their flippers are as close as touching. If they had hands, they'd be holding hands while they were doing this. They're acting in unison, in harmony with each other all the time.
In captivity, that's taken away from them. Almost invariably, a facility will hold captive whales and dolphins, certainly whales, in a tank. Think of this from the whale or the dolphin's point of view, and think about how it would be to be living with your family and then to be taken away from them without any consent on your part, put into a small space when you had all the world to travel and live in, and forced to do the same thing day after day after day.
When I was there, I was fortunate enough to work with baby Shamu, the first baby Shamu. Her name is Kalina. When management came down and said, we're going to be moving her to another park. And then the night of the move, she's lifted out of the med pool in a stretcher, put in a big container onto a truck, and she's gone. And it has just stayed with me in a way I can't even probably express very well how heart-wrenching it was to watch her. Her mother left in the pool, Katina, after her baby had been removed. We've taken this family that has known nothing but being together, and we're taking this young offspring away from its mother, and she just was screeching and crying in a way that had never seen her. They were vocalizations I had never seen her do before. She was not really a vocal whale in general. Like Goodwin was super vocal, Katina was not, but just hunched over, stayed in the corner of that pool for hours on end, screeching and crying. It was horrifying.
You know, despite the efforts of a whole lot of us to try to inform people that really they're not happy at all in captivity, that they die young, SeaWorld has been trying to tell people for 4 decades that everything's fine. They're happy there, but it really wasn't until the death of the trainer in February of 2010 at Orlando SeaWorld that the word started to get out. And then along came blackfish.
It's one of America's favorite attractions. Every day, thousands of people flock to SeaWorld to see their favorite marine life animals at play. But this morning, a new documentary exposing the darker side of the theme park is making waves of its own.
I mean, that film, you know, it debuted in January 2013 at Sundance Film Festival, and for 6 months it made the rounds of film festivals, and it got incredible buzz. It changes people. When they come out of the theater, they're disgusted with themselves that they ever believed that, and more so at the industry, at SeaWorld in particular, for lying to them all these years and for doing this horrible, horrible thing to the whales and making it look like and selling it as something that is good for everybody and the whales are happy there. But in North America and Europe, it's over. I mean, I just, people are not going to go back. So there's going to have to be a new kind of marine park. We don't mind them staying in business as long as they don't hurt whales and dolphins. So they've got to let their whales and dolphins go and not depend on having any live animals or certainly any live whales and dolphins in their parks. I mean, let the special effects wizards of Hollywood loose on the marine parks, and we'll see some amazing results.
So I've thought about these things for the last 50 years, and I've come to the conclusion that the solution to the problem is to identify those that can be released back in the wild, and not all of them can, and release them.
Not all whales, or cetaceans in general for that matter, are fit for release back into the wild. They are all definitely able to go to be transported to a sea pen where they can experience the natural rhythms of the ocean. That's a drastically better life than living in a small pool full of chemicals in like blazing hot Florida. So every single cetacean absolutely is fit for being released to a coastal sea pen.
For a long time, it's been very mainstream to go to a whale or dolphin show and get your sort of marine conservation education that way.
Fast forward into the future, young people are going to look back at this period of time and go, wow, that's when it all kind of changed. And that's when this whole social movement started. And that's when this sort of level of social consciousness began. And so the writing's on the wall.
These young people that are out here really just kind of get it, like intrinsically get it. And I think that's what's going to shift the whole paradigm to the change that we're all looking for.
It's entirely up to us. Our generation is holding the key to ending this practice. In this instance, we are the heroes we've been waiting for.
By helping end cetacean captivity, you are changing the world. I'm not kidding. You are changing the world.
And I think a piece of advice I'd give to students is to try and raise awareness about these issues online, whether it's starting a blog, signing a petition, whether it's just telling your friends and family on Facebook or something. Any of these little things can really help.
The spread of information is really the cornerstone of this movement. It's the driving force behind it, and this generation is in a particular position to harness that power, to make our voices heard more than ever before.
So it could be anyone, anywhere, like a 15-year-old kid with a piece of chalk, just drawing a whale like that and writing, I love whales, in Bangkok, or whatever. But the point is that we can all do something with whatever our passion is and be a voice for the voiceless. They're counting on us.
It's so much in the hands of students to stop this particular industry because we're the ones going to marine parks. We're the ones going to swim with dolphin programs. It's mostly kids. So if kids decide, hey, we're not supporting this because it's uncool, because these animals are suffering, they're stressed out, and it's not right to keep an animal in less than 1% of its habitat, then the industry's done.
It's up to the young people to stop buying tickets.
Don't buy the ticket.
Just don't go. It's really that simple.
Don't buy the ticket.
Just don't buy a ticket.
You can make a difference. Don't buy the ticket.
If you can get your entire school to vow not to buy a ticket to a marine park, then you've done more than a lot of adults.
A small group of people or an individual can make a difference.
You can make a difference. Absolutely. You can make a big difference.
Because I think in my generation, there's a lot of complacency, not because of like a lazy attitude of like, oh, I don't want to do anything. It's that kids really believe that they can't do anything. And it's like this very common belief. And so I always try to debunk that with my own story. I'm like, well, I was just a kid with a laptop. So, you know, and I was able to do something to help make a difference. So it's like you can take whatever your talent is and turn it into something to raise awareness for an issue that's important to you, no matter what it is. We're the generation. We have the ability to stop this industry. It's time to end this cruelty. Don't buy the ticket.
That's good, right?
Was it good? Okay.
Again in a stain coat. Fly, you've got to let them know. Slow, they're all slow, and they're mine for the taking. And babe, your blood is worth all the waiting. Sure, how it goes, and back through all the biting gold. Well, now I know how it flows. 'Cause in the dark, feel our hope. In the can't dine without your permission. So just say the word. Won't you let me in? I can't dine without your permission. So just say the word. Won't you let me in?